So the symptoms are quite variable, as everyone has become aware of. And in fact, we initially were screening at the entrance to the hospital, our employees and patients for fever, cough, shortness of breath, and that then expanded to include other symptoms such as diarrhea, loss of taste or loss of smell. These were all said to be symptoms that were seen in COVID patients, and they are. I think this is an unusual illness that can present with myriad symptoms. It is somewhat, it seems, age dependent in that younger patients may have very few symptoms, perhaps just some malaise, kind of not feeling quite right, perhaps a low-grade fever or respiratory symptoms. It seems as though in the younger population, gastrointestinal symptoms are more common, such as diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite. In older patients, as you get into the middle age group, respiratory symptoms tend to predominate with fever, cough, shortness of breath. Occasionally chest pain can be part of this with increased work of breathing. In the older population, we are seeing also a myriad of symptoms, but it tends to be more weakness, some respiratory symptoms often, but there may not be the same respiratory focus, decrease in mental status, not responding as they normally would. And often in the older population, it's difficult to get an accurate history. Many of these patients have an altered ability to communicate at baseline. So we have to use our antennae to pick up on some of the nonverbal signs and symptoms. So it is quite a spectrum. It varies somewhat with age, and we just have to be quite aware and be careful.
The biggest reason being is the collection of the data itself. It takes time to actually collect it, collate it, interpret it, and do the analysis. So that's what takes the time in delaying our results.
I would encourage everyone to continue to follow some of the logical basics, that is safe distancing, and also to avoid extremes. You know, everyone is really ready to get out there and socialize again, but we have to be very cautious and take this in a stepwise fashion. So I think smaller groups of congregation rather than larger groups is wise. Family members and close friends who have been asymptomatic, you can probably be a little more open with, but I would still very much caution people, particularly if you are in any of the at-risk groups, to continue to exercise caution, safe distancing, hand washing, masking when appropriate, and we who are in a higher risk group may actually be at higher risk as social distancing and those restrictions are lifted. So we have to be very careful. So I would recommend exercising caution and going slowly.
The important issue with the influenza vaccine is that influenza virus that is passed not unlike COVID-19. So we are looking at the exact same risk factors of spread as we are with COVID-19. That being said, because we do have the vaccine for influenza, we would always recommend getting the vaccine every year, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not.
So I think one of the things that we said at the beginning was we would make it through this together, and that's really what we did. I think my take on it was we were fairly well prepared, although nobody knew really what was in store. We had a tremendous response from all levels of this organization to pull together and to face this together. And I'm still very impressed with what our staff members and this whole organization from housekeeping on out were able to do to respond to this. And I don't want to leave out the community, because their support was key to keeping us going. Food and donations of supplies, it really got us through a tough period. I think communication was key, because things changed from day to day, sometimes hour to hour, and it was really incumbent upon us, and continues to be important, to communicate with not just the internal organization staff, but to the community, what needs to be done and what changes are in place in order to continue to take good care of patients and protect everyone in the community.
The biggest thing that stands out to me is the very fluid nature of the pandemic and how it has evolved. How we thought it was going one way in terms of the epidemiology, but then did a complete right turn, and we were down another path. So the fluidity of the pandemic has been huge. The other part for me is how woefully underprepared we are for most pandemics.